All right. Good morning from Canada. My name's Joanna, if we've not met before, and welcome to my home. You may notice it is a little sunny on the wall here today, and the movement is the trees. It's super windy, so hopefully that is not distracting during today's practice. But today is our weekly live session together, and I thought I would take you on a slightly different journey today. So this is inspired by what I've been seeing as a teacher within my community. So I teach predominantly seniors or tending to range from the 50 plus category. And so a lot of the classes I'm teaching are gentle. Lots of gentle hatha, slow flows, yin, restorative, chair yoga. But I was starting to feel a little concerned that we were focusing so much on creating space and opening in the body and softening and releasing, but we were losing that strength element. So I started to weave in exercises either during the warm-up portion of practice or as we were leading towards a peak pose that would help to strengthen and target specific areas of the body. And these exercises are not yoga asana, but they are nice exercises to weave into your yoga asana sequence if it feels appropriate. So I feel like with this session, we're not going to get through everything I want today, so I might do a part 2 to this. But today I want us to focus on 3 specific areas of the body: the abdominals, the core, the arms and shoulders, and the hips. I think if we have a strong core, we're going to feel more steady, stable, and safe on our mats. If we have strong hips, we're going to feel more balanced and secure. And if we have strong arms, we're going to feel steadier in downward facing dogs, our planks, our chaturangas, and so on. So those are the areas I want us to target today. Feel free to join in with the exercises, or feel free to just take notes if you prefer. I recommend that you grab a block. We'll need that at some points. And there is also the option. So at one of my studios, we have these TheraBands. So if you have access to one of those, some of these exercises you can do with the TheraBand, and I'll let you know which ones. So this is going to add another element of challenge probably to what you're asking your students to do. But I've found that over time, because I've been doing these exercises with my students for a long time, that this really helps to add a little extra layer of spice to the exercises. So feel free to grab one of those as well. So like I said, we'll start with abdominals and we'll move from there. We'll see how far we can get. I'm just going to take my little notes with me so we don't get waylaid. All right, I will meet you on your mat, bearing in mind that this is a blend of body conditioning, barre, yoga, Pilates. It's a fusion of exercises that I have collected over my years as a practitioner and as a dancer that I've found super helpful and beneficial to the health and safety of our bodies and to allow us to maintain safe, stable, accessible yoga practices. Okay, so I'm going to meet you on your mat, and I'd love for you to start on your back. I'm just going to take this extra layer off. Oops. Just check that didn't affect the sound. Okay, so once you are on your backs, you're going to grab your block. So I really love to do this exercise either at the start of a practice, especially if you're teaching a more fiery practice. But like I said, it's also really great to come into this abdominal work maybe before you teach a balancing sequence or before you start to work towards inversions. So you're going to take your block and you're going to place it between your inner thighs at its skinniest width. And then you're going to extend your two legs into the sky. You can have both of your feet flexed, or you can just flex your toes. So looks like you're wearing stilettos, just the balls of your feet flex into the sky. Make sure you're right in the middle of your mat. Plant your hands to the back of your head with your elbows wide. So this is a 4-part exercise. To begin, you're asking your students to squeeze the block between their inner thighs and draw the belly button down to the floor. Now already this is creating a lot of core stability and strength. And you really want to continue to feel that rooting down of belly button to mat. From here, as you inhale, you're going to lift the back of your pelvis off the floor, lifting your feet higher to the sky. As you exhale, you're going to bring your head and shoulders off the floor. As you inhale, you're going to lift the back of your pelvis, your head and shoulders a little bit higher. And as you exhale, you're lowering all of that back to the floor. So let's do that again. Inhale, back of the pelvis lifts and holds. Exhale, head and shoulders lift and hold. Inhale, everything lifts and holds. Exhale, everything lowers. We'll do one more. Inhale, lift the back of the pelvis up. Exhale, head and shoulders up. Inhale, everything up. And exhale to lower. Okay. And you can do many rounds of that. I usually do about 5 or 6 rounds of that. Another option, keeping the block where it is, hands are flat on the floor, squeezing the block, flexing the feet up. You can simply do pelvic lifts. So as you inhale, you're lifting the feet to the sky. As you exhale, you're lowering the back of the pelvis down. Inhale to lift and exhale to lower. And again, you can do this as many times as you like. This is wrapping strength around your lower abdomen, all the way up and all the way down. What you don't want to do or see is the legs swinging towards your chest and then simply back to the floor, swinging towards the chest and back. It's more about the legs lifting directly up to the ceiling and down to the floor. It's more challenging. Okay, further to this, removing your block, placing your hands to the backs of the hamstrings and having your knees stacked over your hips. Your shins are parallel with the floor, so your legs are in a 90-degree angle, belly button's pulled down to the mat. As you inhale your breath, you'll roll up your head, your shoulders and your chest to the height that, to the maximum height that you can come to. You're looking at the gap between your two thighs. And for some of you, this is where you'll stay. For others of you, you'll try and keep the upper body where it is and extend one or both arms out in front of you, long, and hold, and pull down and breathe in and keep lifting those shoulders off the floor. I usually stay there for 5 breaths and then encourage the students to come down. You can add on to that. So take the knees back over the hips, hands to the backs of the hamstrings. Inhale, lift the chin, lift the chest off the floor, looking forwards between your legs. Hands stay here or arms extend forwards. Option to tap your right toes down to the floor and then bring the knee back over the hip. Left toes down, knee back over the hip. And you can continue with this, again, as many times as feels good. Keep lifting those shoulder blades away from the floor. And when you've had enough of that, lower everything back down, hug the knees to the chest, and rock across the lower back. Ooh, it's a lot of work. Okay, I'm going to show you one more core exercise that I find really effective. And this one involves coming from a seated position. I like to use the block as a little steering wheel. So your hands are on either side of the block. If you don't have a block, you can simply ask your students to clasp their hands together, elbows lifted. Basically, you want to imagine there's a little beach ball almost between your arms that you're hugging. So the arms aren't super close to your chest, they're a little distance away. Your feet are flat on the floor for this, and then you're going to start to lean the body back. So you have a long diagonal line from the crown of your head to your tailbone. The belly button's pulling back and in. Softness around your elbows, collarbones wide, chest open. So we're not rounding here, we're lifting through the chest. Already this involves a lot of core stability, and for some of your students, they'll stay here. Further to this, your students are going to start to turn their steering wheel, their chest, over to the right, imagining that their right elbow would eventually touch the floor to the right side of the mat. But it doesn't quite. But your upper body now is in this gentle twist. You're still leaning back. And then you'll bring everything back to center, still leaning back, but bringing the block or the hands back in front of your gaze. We'll do that to the left. So you're turning your upper body to the left, getting your left elbow closer to the floor but not touching, and then drawing everything back to center. And you can do this as many times as you like. Pulling everything back to center, core is stable. This is working the oblique muscles, so into the side body, which is so great for our stability and balance. And you can feel free to continue this as many times as you like. You might add a pulsing element here. So as you reach one side, maybe you'll take a pulse, a little squeeze. Keep dipping that left elbow towards the floor. Shoulders relaxed, collarbones wide. You might do 8 little dips on this side, and then back to center. And then you might do 8 little dips on the other side. And then you might come back to center. And then rolling all the way up. And it can feel nice at that point to take the feet together, knees wide, heels towards your midline, and take butterfly pose, hinging forwards at the hips. There's a nice release because you might find that that feels tight into your hip flexors. So with all of those ab exercises, you can get creative with them. You can add them in wherever feels appropriate in your class, and you can determine whether you take static holds in those poses, whether you add a pulsing element, and how many repetitions you want to do. Maybe you start the class with one of those core exercises, and then as the class unfolds, you might bring it back again, maybe before you reach your peak pose. And maybe then once you reach your cool down, you add in another little core element, maybe a gentle roll down to the mat, back towards Shavasana. So you're still activating that core. Maybe that's the theme for your practice. I want to move on now because there's a few more elements I want to get to today, but there are many, many other core exercises I could demonstrate. So if you're curious, then please leave me a comment. I can always do another part to this. I'd love now for us to move into arms. So for arms, you'll need your block. And I want you to put the block on your mat in front of you. You're going to come onto your hands and knees to start. And then we're going to lower down onto our forearms. So I would love for your forearms to be either side of your block. And the reason we're doing this is because when we come onto our forearms and start to add pressure into the forearms and shoulders, we can sometimes see the elbows going wider and wider. So the block acts as an aid for us to hug against so that the forearms stay parallel. So come down, Forearms hugging your block, hands and forearms flat to the mat. I want you to press down into the floor so you feel your chest lifting away from the floor, and I want you to squeeze the block with your forearms. This is not only going to strengthen around your upper arms, especially into your tricep muscles on the backs of your arms, but it's also going to strengthen around your shoulder girdles. So I want you to think about drawing your shoulder blades back and down and slightly towards one another, as if you're trying to squeeze a pencil between the shoulder blades. Press down into your hands, forearms into the block, tuck your toes, and start to hover your kneecaps away from the floor. Not only is this targeting your arms and shoulders, but it's also targeting your core, your quadriceps, and the fronts of your thighs. This is a great one to do to fire up the body, to warm everything up from the inside out. You can stay here, or you can encourage your students to walk their feet back into a longer plank position. From here, they can have their knees up, or they can lower their knees down, checking that there's a lovely diagonal line from the crown of their head to their kneecaps. You can stay here for 3 breaths maybe, 5 breaths maybe, seeing how it feels for your students. And then after that, you can walk the feet back in, hover the knees just off the floor. Maybe you take 3 more breaths here. Testing, challenging. And then lowering the knees down, resetting. You might come into a child's pose. You might roll all the way up. I'll add a few more elements to this one because it's a favorite of mine. And again, you can use this or not in your own practices. So forearms back to the earth. You're hugging the block. You're hugging the mat. You're tucking the toes. And you're lifting and hovering the kneecaps just off the floor. Another fan favorite is to just tap the right foot to the back of the mat and then bring that right foot back in and extend and lower the left foot to the floor behind you and bring that back in. That's all it is. It's a little tap back with the right foot and in, knees still hovering off the mat, and the left foot and in. Notice that the pelvis is not moving up or down, staying in the same line, just the legs moving. Woo! Okay, another one is to lift the legs longer and straighter towards the sky, hugging the heels back towards the floor. This may look a little more familiar as a yoga asana. You're looking at your block, pressing down into the forearms, lifting the chest. And again, you can play with staying here and then walking the feet back into plank pose. And then walking the feet back, lifting the pelvis high into this dolphin variation. Lower your knees and release your arms. Maybe take a couple of shoulder rolls. Another very simple way to warm up and strengthen the arms and shoulders is through press-up exercises. So we'll remove the block to one side. We'll come onto our hands this time, and we'll walk our feet and knees back so that we start to create a lovely long diagonal line again from the kneecaps to the crown of your head. So you want to draw your pelvis slightly forwards and down towards the mat. Your core is engaged. We'll do a couple versions of press-ups. First version is to take the elbows wide. So if I was facing you, hands are underneath the shoulders, elbows go wide, and then come back towards straight. I love to do this really slowly and about 5 rounds of this. So we would go down for 2, and we would come up for 2. And again, down for 2, and up for 2. Another version is to keep the elbows closer to the sides of your rib cage like you would in chaturanga. You don't want your elbows to squeeze against your rib cage. You do want there to be a little gap, but it's a different sensation to do a press up with the elbows hugging in as opposed to the elbows moving wide. When the elbows are a bit wider, you might feel the sensation wrapping more across your pectoral muscles and under your arms, under your armpits. When your elbows are hugged in more, there's a likeliness you'll feel more sensation in your triceps and the backs of the arms. So you can also play with that as another way to prepare the arms for more strengthening exercises such as chaturanga, planks, any kind of forearm stands. So for this one, hands are still underneath the shoulders, but instead of the elbows going wide, the elbows stay closer. And again, we come down for 2, and we come up for 2. We go down for 2, chest coming forwards, and up for 2. Again, you can do as many rounds of that as feels appropriate for you and for your class. There are other exercises you can also do if you have a TheraBand for the arms. One is to place the band around the forearms with the hands facing one another. You can do this from mountain pose, you can do this in goddess, so you could do this standing, you could do this with your legs in a big squat here. And basically you're going to have your arms in front of you. Elbows are not touching the rib cage, they're a little bit further in front of you. Your lower ribs are hugged in. You could also do this in toe stretch, that's a great idea. Shoulders relaxed. And we're simply going out for 2 and in for 2 with the band. Out for 2 and in for 2. Out for 2 and in for 2. And while you're doing this, you're thinking about the shoulders dropping down, the shoulders wrapping down the back of your rib cage so that you can start to feel strength building in the shoulder girdle and into the arms. Another option with the band is to take the band behind you now, still wrapped around the forearms. And for this one, you take the arms back as far back as you can, nice and long. And again, you go out for 2 and in for 2. Out for 2 and in for 2. This one works a little more into the triceps and still around the shoulders. Final option I'll show you with the band is you put the band in one hand and place that hand to your chest. You put your other hand into the loop of the band at the bottom. All of the palm of your hand is into the loop, like so. And you're kind of holding onto that band at the bottom. And from here, you're going to take that arm back for 2 and then in for 2. So you're creating length and extension and then softness. Little length, pushing back, and then adding a bend. This one again is for your lovely triceps, a muscle we commonly use in our yoga asana. All right, we can do that on the other sides. Then the other hand is in the top of the band and the hand is to the chest. The bottom hand is in the loop. Your lower ribs are hugged in and you can press back for 2 and in for 2. Again, you could do this in toe stretch. You could do this on your knees. You could do this in mountain pose. You could do this in goddess pose. You can do as many rounds as you like. You could add a pulsing element at the back. Little pulse, little pulse. You'll soon start to feel those arms firing up. Okay, so that's the band. Hips, how are we doing? Okay, I've got about 5 minutes. I'll whiz through hips as best I can, but I'm definitely going to do a part 2 for this. So we'll start on our hands and knees. This one's great after you've just done maybe cat-cow at the start of class or some hip circles. You're going to take your right knee out to the right, and you're going to start taking your right knee towards the back of the mat, right knee down towards the floor, hovering just off the mat, right knee towards your chest and towards your right elbow, and then back out to the right. So you're basically making one big giant circle with your right hip. You're going really slow. You're trying to keep equal weight through both of your hands, a little softness through your elbows, and just noticing how this feels. It's a great way to check in with the hips, to see how fluid things are, whether there's any stickiness. And you might also start to feel this building a bit of heat and a bit of strength around the hips. You can also take this in the other direction, so the right knee comes towards the right elbow, towards the chest, hovers just off the floor, right knee back behind you, and then all the way out to the side. This one also triggers the abdomen, the core. So you're drawing the belly button in, and you're doing your best to take this right knee as close to the right elbow and towards your chest as you can. You can do that as many times as you like. I can already feel that building into the glutes. Same on the other side. You can take that left knee back, hover it just off the floor, knee to chest, knee to elbow, and back wide. Lots of circles this way. And then you can simply change and go in the other direction. Woo! It doesn't take long to start to feel that one. It's very simple, but very effective. If this is too much pressure on any of your students' wrists, they could always do this from their forearms as well. Just ensure they're not collapsing into their middle back if they're there, that they're pressing down into the floor with their forearms, core is engaged, and they can maintain the same exercise from there. So those are hip circles. We need strong hips so that we feel balanced and steady in all of our standing asana and in our balancing asana. Another great one is hamstring curls, which again you can do on your hands or you can do on your forearms. You'll take your right leg back behind you. You'll lift your right leg up so your right heel is in line with your right hip. You're drawing your lower ribs in, core engaged, again, so we're not collapsing into the middle of our back. Pulling everything up and in, press down into the hands or forearms. And then bend your right knee, so the sole of your right foot is flexed to the ceiling. From here, there's lots of options. So I like to take a couple up and down, as if you're pressing that right foot up to the sky and back down to the earth. A little up and down. And again, you could do little pulses at the top, little pulse. We're working into the glutes and the hamstrings now, which we know we use very frequently in our yoga practice, but very often we're working to create length and space in those areas and not always strength, depending on the style of class. Further to this, you could squeeze the right heel towards the glute and then extend the right leg towards the back of the room. Bring the heel in and squeeze, and all the way back. Bear in mind, you can do all of these exercises with the accompaniment of your TheraBand, which does make it a little more challenging. And then further to this, extending the right leg long, pointing the right toes, and we'll take the right leg all the way up and all the way down, all the way up and all the way down. Again, notice I start to really collapse in my lower back there, so drawing the belly button in. And then maybe at the top, little pulses, making sure that your right knee, top of the right foot's facing down to the floor, hips are facing down to the floor. So we're definitely targeting the back of the hamstring and the glute rather than the outer hip and thigh. Okay, and then of course, whatever you do on the one side, you'll want to repeat on the other side. I'll give you one more hip exercise that we can do from hands and knees that works the outer hip and thigh. I'll do this on the left side just so I have some balance through the body. So you're going to put your right forearm down on the mat, parallel with the short edge of the mat. Left hand flat on the mat, left leg long behind you. Start to turn your hips out, so you're looking more to the left. Hips are stacked, left hip on top of the right hip. Chest is slightly turned to the left. Left foot is off the floor, your left toes are facing the left, your left knee is facing the left. So this left leg is turned out. From here, you'll inhale, lift the left leg up for 2, and then hover for 2. We go up for 2 and hover. Again, you could have the band around your thighs here, adding an extra element to being here. At the top here, you could take little pulses. So you go to the maximum range of movement, and then you add a little pulsing element, keeping those toes facing the left foot flexed. Further to this, maybe you bend the left knee towards the left elbow, squeezing those oblique muscles, and then push the sole of that left foot back up to the sky on that diagonal line. So knee coming towards the elbow, squeeze, and then leg extending. This is creating lots of power and strength around your outer hips and thighs, which is going to give you lovely stability in your lunges and your balancing. Nice. Okay, and I'll come down. Like I said, anything you do on one side, you'll want to repeat it to the other side, depending on how you sequence that. So any repetitions you do one side, please match it to the other side. Feel free to use the band for any of those exercises that we just did for the hips. You would wrap the band around the tops of the thighs, and that will add a little extra resistance. And I hope some of this has been useful. I hope you take some of these exercises into your own practice and into the classes that you teach, and see whether it helps your students fire at those areas of the body that you're hoping that they can stimulate and target. And I hope that you see a little difference between your students' stability on their mat, and maybe they'll feel a little more empowered, a little prouder, a little stronger. Maybe they'll stand a little taller, knowing that they have fired up some of these key areas that we need for safe yoga practices. I hope this has been helpful. Feel free to reach out in the comments. I'd love to hear from you, and stay tuned. I will do a part 2 where we'll look at the back and we'll look at the legs. Okay, take care.